Okay. Good evening, friends. Today we'll discuss on trends in ideology. Ideology is nothing but a body of ideas which are going to be the basis for forming a national or sectarian policy. So whenever we are going to form a policy, we require some ideas or some views, my dear friends, based on which we are going to define or design a policy. So what does ideology have to do with feminism or women's studies? Most of the people will be asking about that. So, is it not sufficient for the individuals for practicing feminism? Does they need Old Testament to reassure about themselves or about what? The reason why we turn to ideology and trend is that it is going to give us a firm basis to understand the situation of women. So once we are going to understand the situation clearly about what happened in the past, what it is right now. So based on which, my dear friends, we are going to design the policies so that people will be benefited. So feminists are the people who are going to look and practice in order to uplift the condition of women. So in order to contextualize by any awareness of ideology or the trends, my dear friends, we are going to put them in action. We find a systematic justification of women's rights in the 19th century, which is based on liberal or democratic theory. At the same time, we also have socialists and who have attacked the liberalists and came up with their own analysis in terms of women, in terms of relation with economical activities or the family relations, and so on, my dear friends. So let us discuss about some of the theories or ideology which are linked with feminism. The first one is liberal feminism. Um, there are specific theories of feminism which are more or less historical manner. That means we shall touch upon the feminist theories of the 18th and early 19th century, my dear friends. Let us see the first one, the first liberal movement for feminism. The first one is equality of vote or suffrage. The movement started suddenly in the mid 19th century. It took before the close of 18th century when men first raised for women's voices against endless domination. It's not the women, it's the men itself first who raised the voice against the unjust being happening to the women. Women were led in this revolutionary thinking by Mary. In her own life was the testimony for the subjugation of men and social practices laid down by them. In her book, Vindication of the Rights of Women, brought out in the year 1792, was one of the most powerful feminist critic of the times, my dear friends. Mary's uncontrolled anger was against the uh, tyranny of man over woman, which gave rise to all social evils that women suffered because of lack of education, denial of fulfilling work, insufficient wages, discrimination in social acceptance, and so on. The vindication of rights of women, the book has demanded for education, work, and equal companion with males in the society. It also said that the woman, concerns of women, and expose the myths created by men. It created the myths created by men that the members of the fair sex were happy with their status and position in the society. If both the gender, both the male and female, are going to get equal status and equal opportunities in all the life, then they will be happy in the society. They were violent. They were violent and open attacks on Mary too. But um, she was also tutored to separate this interest from the interest of men. The movement also received the attention of some men who broke away from the rest of the sex and refused to maintain their privileges. But when the males started supporting the women, even these men also were tortured and troubled, my dear friends. So in the late 18th century, especially in 1970s, there was an increase in awareness about feminist issues. John Stuart Mill was preparing the draft of his Subjection of Women. In 1825, a socialist philosopher, William Thompson, wrote about the slavery of married life. And he also said that home is the prison house of the wife because the girl is confined only to the four walls. She is not encouraged to go for higher education. She is never allowed to go outside and do a job. That's the reason William Thompson has defined or said that home is a prison house of the wife. He declared this while presenting his plea for the political equality of women. But such support was short lived as Thompson himself was ridiculed and excluded from the society. 40 years later, in the year 1869, John Stuart Mill tried again through his logical presentation the subjection of women to support the battle of women, freedom, justice, and a full human status. So at the time, there were debates going on whether the position of women um, should be increased or not. And there was a general climate of public awareness about women's rights and their role in different movements. We can find it. The awareness itself has encouraged enough to um, move the discussions from women's rights, women's employment, and the case to reform its existing laws. So the focus was directed to an entirely different, through related argument about women and their identity, morality, and regenerating the power in society. In the year 1869, women's rights feminists and the article of subjection of women was a landmark in the history of women's movements. According to Mill, women were given a subject status in society. It is not because of inferiority in them, but because of the historical culture. Some people say that boy and girl are not physically same. Boys are more superior, physically fit compared with the women. But according to Mill, it's not that. It's not because of the subject status, but because of historical culture. Her physical inferiority to men was converted into legal right, saying that the man is superior and dominant, whereas the women are inferior and weaker, my dear friends. So Mill believed that artificially created distinctions in the status of men and women could be overthrew the sharp reaction of men of the subjecting environment. The distinctions can be modified. Only enlightened womanhood could change woman's self image and restore her dignity in her own estimation. If the girls or the women are enlightened, if they are aware at the time, they can fight for their rights and they can change themselves, they can change their personality. At the same time, they can also restore her own dignity. Mills has described that the abilities of men and women are reciprocal and suggested that he did not believe in one as superior to the other. And he said that if both the people are going to be together at that time, they can be more stronger, my dear friends. They said that if both men and women are together at that time, the bond is going to make the society very, very stronger and advanced. Like the liberal thinkers, he expressed the view that equality of sexes can only be achieved if there is moral reforms, proper education, and suitable legal measures. So all these three has to go together so that we can improve the quality of sexes, my dear friends. He supported women's suffrage and granted legal rights to the women. Mill wrote about ethical double standard that society has set up for the women. The virtues that women were praised for in some areas where of those which negatively affect their individual character and their progress towards personhood. So there are certain virtues where they are praised, but at the same time, these are not going to help them to develop their personality. That's the reason why we are going to call it as ethically double standard. Mill argued that the women be given the same education as men to help them develop not a forced sense of duty but a genuine unselfishness towards their work. Given the right to vote, the women are also going to assume their roles and they are going to become the responsible citizens, and they are also going to perform the functions of the society in an effective way. Tyler viewed towards marriage and roles of men and women in the home are more realistic and reveal consciousness of the pressures that the family is responsible for the place of the woman against the men. Liberal feminists in the 20th century, the feminist mystic written by Betty was somewhat less radical compared with the works of Wollstonecraft. Fredrin was not asking women to sacrifice marriage or motherhood. They suggested that the woman is going to have sufficient time. After completing the household activity, my dear friends, she can come outside and take up the creative work during that time. At the same time, they also said that the other family members also need to be trained about the work conditions at home so that they will understand the pain and the responsibility of the woman. In the second stage, of the feminine mystic, Friedan reviewed the problem of combining marriage and career. Women to get women's movement going again and work with men to change public values, leadership styles, and institutional structures. She is going to say that women has to get into women movements so that they can get into work along with the men. So when they are going to work with the men, the set of rules and regulations may not be the applicably same for men and women. So there is a need for us to change the values, the public values. There is also a need for us to change the leadership styles so that they can treat the people equally, but a little bit provision should be given separately for the women. At the same time, we also need to have the changes in the institutional structures. Unlike Wollstonecraft, Mill, and Tyler, Friedan seemed to advocate a balance of women's assimilation into the workplace with the counter assimilation of men into the family. That means women should be made a part of the work and men should be made a part of the household activities. That is what is her intention. She also argued um, that the task of the liberal feminist is to determine what liberty and equality are for concrete men and women. She moved very, very close to urging women to work with men and for men to produce a truly human society. So, for that, they thought that the right to vote was always the cornerstone for every emancipation and for designing the programs. So, denying the women to have a vote is treated as subordination. So, in the year 1832, the first reform bill was introduced, which also sought to exclude women entirely from the national achievements of the British government. And this has raised a widespread criticism for its biased attempt to legalize the right to vote. Campaigners for the cause of women raised their voice everywhere for education, for law reform, employment, civil rights, and above all, vote for women rights. The first country which gave the right to vote for women was New Zealand in the year 1893, followed by Australia, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, uh, Norway, Russia, and so on before the polls were done in the British victory in the year 1918. So almost 25 years before the British victory, polls before in the British victory, they have given the rights to vote for women in New Zealand in the year 1893. So here we are going to override goals of liberal feminism. Its main duty was to application of liberal principles to women as well as to men. So whatever the rights are being enjoyed by the men, it should also be applicable, enjoyable by the women. That was the main concern um, in terms of liberal. Now let us go for the Marxist feminism. Marxist theory was formulated in the 19th century at a time when the impact of industrial revolution was becoming evident. The liberal democrats and bourgeois revolutions were just occurring in Europe. Marxists brought about a sudden attack on the capitalist system. For Marxists, the notion of class underpins all social phenomena, including the oppression of women. His main idea, the main idea of Marxists, is to ensure that the society should be a classless society. If we see, he has classified the societies into five types like primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism. The first one, primitive communism, it is regarded as a classless society, whereas in slavery, feudalism, and capitalism, we have differentiation of people like haves and have-nots, who have the right on life and who does not in the slavery system. In the feudalism, who have land and who does not have land, and in the capitalism, bourgeoisie and proletariat, my dear friends. So his main intention or idea was to produce a classless society. So for Marxism, class rather than gender is the most important issue. It's not the gender, it's the class which was very, very important for him. So Marx and Engels acknowledge that women's equality with men is critical to a classless society. How women's experience under capitalism is different from that of men is not directly addressed in the works of Karl Marx, my dear friends. Most of what is interpreted by Marxist theory comes us from the Marx early essays, the Communist Manifesto, which was written in the year 1848, and Marx's unfinished work, Das Kapital. After the death of Marx, Engels has tried to spread the ideas of Marx, my dear friends. Now let us see the ideas of Karl Marx. The first one is production. Um, According to him, they are specially endowed with abilities that distinguish the human beings from that of the animals. They believe that the production of one's means of subsistence make human beings different from that of the other animals. We are able to meet our basic needs by engaging in productive activities such as farming, agriculture, construction of buildings, and so on, which is not found by the animals in a very constructive way. Animals cannot do activities like farming or agriculture. They may construct a house with the help of grass and so on, but not a house just like buildings, just like we are going to have a concrete one. So, for Marxist thinkers, material forces are the prime movers in history. What they define is as the material forces that are used for production and reproduction of social life. So, the mode of production of material life conditions, the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. They are saying that the mode of production is going to put on the conditions for the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. For example, if we see in the modern societies or industrialized societies, the social conditions are entirely different, where people have less faith on the religion, they give much importance to the material aspects, they give much to the individual choice and individualism, and so on. The same way here we are going to have democratic form of government, so we can see a lot of changes compared with the traditional society to that of the modern societies. So the mode of production is going to decide the general process of all these areas, my dear friends. He also said that the mode of production uh, he said that it's not the consciousness of men which is going to determine the existence, but the social existence is going to determine the consciousness. The social existence is going to determine the consciousness of the individuals, based on which the human beings are going to respond and prepare the laws accordingly. Marx held that the ways in which society produces conditions the general process of thinking that it adopts the forces of society production, maybe the raw material, the tools that are going to be used to produce the goods, to that of the relations of production, like the ways in which the production process is organized, which is going to generate a superstructure in terms of political, legal, and social ideas, my dear friends. So they have talked about three things: the force of society's production, tools, everything. Then how they are going to, the relation of production, how the production process is organized, and then we are talking about political, legal, and social ideas. All these three are connected with each other, my dear friends. So, according to Marxist thought, Marxist feminism believes that social existence determines consciousness. That means the woman's self-image is linked to women's work and social status. Production is thus the basis for general outlook on life and the development of thought. So he talked about production because production is going to play a vital role in terms of the status of women. Then he also touched the class. He has analyzed the class system, my dear friends, which is also linked with the women's oppression. And this class is also going to help us in understanding the conceptual tools employed for the analysis of women's oppression. According to Marx, political economy has the seeds of its own destruction. Even with capitalism, the Marxists was have seen extreme division with respect to class. At one end, we are going to have haves who are owning the property, who are going to own the resources, everything. At the other end, we are going to have working class who does not own any resources. They are going to simply own their labor, my dear friends. The rich people or the people who are going to own the property, they are going to make huge profits and they are going to enjoy all the rights. Whereas the people who does not own the resources, they are going to be paid nominal, wherein they can satisfy only some of the basic requirements. Remember that they cannot save the money, they cannot improve their economical condition and whatnot, my dear friends. So classes are not static. Remember that classes are not static, they are dynamic. So when people with who are going to have the same status, they come together, they share their feelings. So obviously, what happens? It may lead to social solidarity. It may try up to bring the unity or bind the people together who are having common identity, who are having common purpose, and who are facing the same issues or problems, my dear friends. Thus, the concept of class plays a vital role in Marxist feminism because this will try to bring the women together as a class of workers, not by their relation to the men as wives, daughters, friends, lovers, or mothers, but as women who are facing the same issues, who are having the same conditions, my dear friends. So, Karl Marx not only discussed about production, he not only discussed about classes, but he also talked about alienation. It is nothing but separation. He talked about four types of separation or alienation, my dear friends. The workers will be alienated from the means of production, from the mode of production, from himself, and from society. That means when we talk about the mode of production, that means the workers are being separated from the machines. If we see the traditional societies, we used to have cottage industries or we used to have guild systems. In the guild system, the beauty is that each and every labor owns their tools. And for each and every guild, we are going to have a master who is going to take the orders and distribute the work to all the people who are there under the guild. So the beauty is that whenever there is work, each and every person is going to get the work, and whatever the profits are going to be earned, that will be shared equally among the members. But once a large scale industries came into existence, this guild system has been simply vanished off. So here the industrialist is going to own all the machines. The worker will simply go to the industry and is going to work for which he is being paid. That means he is being separated from the means of production. Means of production, nothing but the machines. The second one is also being alienated from the mode of production, nothing but the timetable. See, for example, we are having the class from 7 to 8. Actually, it is not my choice, neither your choice. The university has fixed the time, and we are delivering the lecture as per the timetable given by the university. I'm not going to have any choice. I'm not going to make any plans. So even the workers will be alienated or separated from planning too, my dear friends. At the same time, they are also going to be alienated from himself. How you have, what kind of dress you have to put on, how you need to interact with the other people. All this we are going to have a set of rules and regulations where they are going to alienate us from our culture, from our practices, and so on. So when a person can be alienated from himself, he can also be alienated from the entire society. Remember that. So the workers also experience a sense of isolation because of alienation from nature, because of the type of work which they are going to do. So obviously, this alienation is going to take the form of an oppressive form, my dear friends, oppressive form. So when people are going to have oppression, at the time men seek relief. So by having the relationship with the men. But what about women? Men, if they have pressure, whenever they have stress, they simply go to the women, and with the relation with the women, they can release the stress, my dear friends. So what about women? So for women, there is no relief. For women, there is no relief. For this reason, my dear friends, we require an essential structure. For this, we need to understand the problems of women, my dear friends. Then they also try to link between marriage and family. Marxists try to offer a new way of approaching the root causes for sexism and appear to suggest some strategies to bring the changes in the concept of marriage and family with a degree of haziness. Engels, in the origin of the family, private property, and the state, has observed that Marxist theory perceived the institution of family and the role of women in marriage. Family showed that before it came into being as a social institution, there existed a primitive state in which prosperous intercourse was most common. All men were equal, but gradually there was a process of natural selection regarding the restrictions on relationship with blood relatives. So we are going to have certain conditions in terms of blood relations, in terms of sexual relations, like with whom a person can have sexual relation and with whom they cannot have. So we started having certain conditions that people cannot have the relations with the blood relatives. So once this came into enforcement, came into expo, it has brought restraints or restrictions on free relations. So at the time, individual men began to enforce personal possessions. Over a period of time, the paid family with one man married one woman came to be accepted as a social institution. So before that, there was no social institution, but once these restrictions came at the time, this pairing of man and woman has came into the form of social institution, a family, my dear friends. And at the time, most of the families were matriarchal families and matrilineal families, where women used to enjoy all the pleasure, all the power in the house. The mother or the elder female member used to exercise all the authority and choose to uphold all the political, social, and economical power. And according to Marx and Engels, the status of women derived from the role of the household or in the household activity. Because she's to stay at home, she's to do all the activities. That is the reason why she has a higher role or higher position in the society. But when the center of production has shifted from the house and it has been outsourced, when industries came into the existence, at the time the woman's role has become subsidiary to the man's. That is how she has lost the control of production. That is how she has lost the status, my dear friends. Men has become or gained the superior status because of the production and because of production of surplus. Do you know what happens? The women's status has further deteriorated, my dear friends. So they have linked with the family and the production, my dear friends. So, okay. So here it's the family which is going to provide an opportunity for them. So Marxist said that, and the capital was ultimately benefited by the workers, work extracted from the men. So Bistan with her theory of socialization of domestic work similarly belonged to the Marxist tradition because she saw women's oppression as related to her domestic and social role and saw women as a class of the oppressed group in society within the Marxist fold itself. So here, Marxists have seen from the class perspective, whereas Benston has seen from the socialization perspective that both the genders have to be properly socialized so that the status of women can be upgraded, my dear friends. Now, let us discuss about the socialist feminism. This also came from the Marxist perspective with the fundamental respect that they argue that they had not laid enough emphasis on the fact that the oppression of women is by men. Marxists said that oppression of women is not by the men, it is because of the industry or it is just because of the haves, my dear friends. It is just because of production and class. So, in Marxist feminist approach, capital is perceived as being responsible for the conditions, and later on, men as the secondary oppressors. So, for that reason, we are going. The new theory came, which tried to explain the status of women by socialist feminist perspective. They try to stress the fact that domination by class and gender are not identical. Domination by class and gender are not identical. The condition of women and workers cannot be likened with respect to oppression, especially when we try to examine the status of wives and the status of prostitution. Even both the people, the person, male may try to satisfy his biological urge, maybe with the wife or going to a prostitute. But when we talk about likeness, the respect or the oppression, we cannot compare them, my dear friends. That's the reason socialist feminists were putting this aside. According to Heidi Hartman, a socialist feminist, declares that Marxist feminism is inadequate because it gives no clues why people fill particular places. They gave no clue about why women are subordinate to men, whether within the family or outside the family, and why it is not the other way around. They did not give much emphasis on the workers' oppression than to women's oppression. So these people tried to study about class and gender in the socialists. In Marx's unfinished work, Das Kapital, he tried to indicate that capitalist societies were made up of three classes. Were made up of three classes: wage laborers, capitalists, and landlords. The categorization was based on the mode of production, which was capitalist. In his manifesto, he made a distinction between two classes. One is bourgeois and the other one is proletariat. B for businessman. Bourgeois is nothing but the capitalist who owns the industries, whereas the proletariat is nothing but the working class who owns simply their labor. If we see across the history, my dear friends, we find the class struggle based from the slavery system to that of the capitalist society, my dear friends. So he tried to make a scholarly elaboration upon the ideas and identify social classes based on three characteristics. First one is the relationship between the means of production, relationship towards or to the means of production. What kind of production is taking place, or what kind of mechanization has been used. If we see in the slavery system or in the traditional system, we the people used to use animal power and manpower for production. Whereas in the industrialized societies, the animal power and human power has been replaced with the machines like. So how they are going to, what kind of tools they are going to use in terms of production process? That is the first one. Second one is the consciousness of a common exploited position in the process of production. So in each and every society, we are going to have a group which is always exploited. And the third one is the political organization of the group, which helps us to take actions on their own against the oppressors. That means whether the people are going to form the unions or how they are going to fight against the unjust everything, my dear friends. So these are the three characteristics based on which the social classes have been identified by the Karl Marx in the book Das Capital or the Proletariat and the Bourgeois model, my dear friends. Einstein, a revolutionary critic of Marxist theory, looks for explanations into the exploitations and oppression of women in society. Although the Economical Condition Act was determining factors, the feminist approach emphasized the patriarchal factors as continuing component of women's oppression. Even there may be economical factors, but because our society has been turned from matriarchal to patriarchal, where the male members are going to dominate the society or the family, that is one of the major factor for the women's oppression. They believe that dual Marxist feminist analysis is necessary in order to formulate a clear or correct picture on the status of women. So we must not just re-examine the way women have been fitted into the class categories, but we must redefine the categories themselves. So by doing this, we can take a look of the cross-class commonalities among men, and we can also relate that to the aspects of their lives, such as reproduction, child rearing, sexuality, consumption, and maintenance at home. So, when you're going to re examine the status of women, then we can also categorize it, redefine women, their issues, and so on, my dear friends. So, for the analysis of the society by Marxist thinkers, we have to take account of economical relationship and exploitation and oppression within them. But the revolutionary feminists analyze the social situation, revealed that patriarchy preceded capitalism and combined with capitalism to create conditions. So both patriarchy and capitalism are going to create the conditions for the oppressment of women. The new feminism, therefore, is interested not just in studying economical power relations, but also power relations of sexual and racial oppressions. We can also see the racial oppression not only on men but also on female or women too, my dear friends. And this exploitation not only happening in the developed countries or sorry underdeveloped countries or developing countries, it is also we can also see that in the developed country like America too, which calls themselves as a big brother, my dear friends. Even now, the Africans or the blacks are treated as inferior to the whites and they look them down, my dear friends. So, exploitation speaks about economical reality of capitalist class relations for men as well as women, whereas oppression refers to women and minorities, which are defined in the context of patriarchal, racist, and capitalist relations, my dear friends. Now, let us study about utopianism. Utopia is a word which is coined by Thomas More, and though it means a dream world, it also means nowhere because it's only a dream. Associating it with the feminist thought suggests that feminist thought has created a society so unlike the real society that it cannot exist anywhere. It is an unreal, unimaginable society in which nothing is as in this world. Roles are reversed, almost as in the play or game. The socialist feminists, however, explain that it helps in describing an alternative society, a model society depicting the changes expected in the present society, my dear friends. the elements of the society that is invented, women's place in relation to society. It implies the reversal of women's roles, which brings about changes in personal identities, sexual relationships, family arrangements, childbearing customs, economical structures, and so on. Fuller participation of women in public life and in political and economical structures will also call for the inclusion of women in the domestic sphere. So we are going to say that women can take full-fledged activity or participation in all political, social, economical activities. At the same time, men should be included in domestic spheres in what she describes it as an element of visionary, futuristic thought. Uh, the utopian concept of society in which women occupy positions of power and are liberated from the fixed domestic roles. So they must be given an opportunity to work, explore themselves, and take active part in all the arenas, and not only the work which is fixed at the domestic area. Now let us study about femininity and masculinity. The critique of gender identity emphasizes female psychological development. As a result of asymmetrical child rearing, men and women develop different paths. With both sexes develop a female person, the mother, the male child is more conscious of his identity as being different. The fundamental truth for him is I and not you. Nancy, in her writings on family structure and feminine personality, has argued that it's the father who sex-typed children and made them conform to what was called as gender-appropriate behavior. The men were generically human, where the women were termed deviant or alien. The upbringing of the child was taken up as to make the boy child repress or reject the residual elements of femaleness by denial of sameness with the mother. Then we have the division of public and private worlds. In this, socialist feminists said that it's a gender blind nature of Marxist thought. They try to bring together the essential concepts in Marxist radical and psychoanalytical approaches. Clara, one of the core revolutionaries of Lenin, was the first to discuss the division of public and private worlds. She believed that it was essential for us to study the degree and the nature of oppression of women both in the public as well as private domains. The categories were described under Marxist analysis of societies, which was not adequately explained by capitalism, which has assigned to women to the household and men to the workplace, or by women's work in subordination to that of the men. Uh, she said that our duty is to study about the public and private life. The area with uncontended belonging to the private world is the sexuality and procreation. The belong when we are going to talk about the sphere or the economy, we are going to talk about both the public as well as the private realms. When we talk about the public realms, it is going to provide the identity. When we the areas of the private world are linked with sexuality, procreation, and so on, my dear friends. Um, Radical feminists, in contrast, give a gender analysis of who will fill which place under patriarchy. In the radical feminists, they are saying that men are going to take care of activities outside, whereas the women are forced to take care of the activities at home. And there has been, because of the patriarchal system, we have seen certain universal phenomena of women's oppression through sexual harassment, rape, women battering. And if we see in India, we also have the concept of sati, parda system, and so, which were condemned at that time. Psychoanalytic feminists also provide an analysis on the basis of gender to explain the public and private domains of women and men, respectively, my dear friends. And we also have socialization, which is going to play a vital role, because through the process of socialization, we are going to help the people understand themselves about their roles to be performed in the society. They try to understand the construction of myths regarding the biological differences and the perception of the roles to be performed. Juliet pointed out that women's oppression originated in the home itself, while her oppression at work is related with the feminine psychic. It is in her position uh, for subordination in her roles as wife, mother, housekeeper that she gets more constraint. The oppressed nature of women's role was found in the way of functions of reproduction, sexuality, and the socialize of children were structured within the family. Our gender relations in turn was determined by ideological constructions of society. Now we also have the next one is exploitation. Socialist feminists mainly attack on the gender blind characteristics of Marxist thought, that it is its tendency to dismiss women's oppression as not significantly different from the oppression of workers. Unlike the traditional Marxists, the social feminists explain women's oppression in two different ways. One is the dual systems approach, and the other one is unified systems approach. Juliet Mitchell, in her book Women's Estate, expounded the dual system theory, argued that both patriarchy as well as capitalism has given scope for women's exploitation, my dear friends. But the exploitation of women in the family was non-material and biosocial. The result ideas generated in the society about the way in which women should relate with men. Mitchell opined that ideological mode in which patriarchy exploited women and the economical mode by which capitalism exploited the workers are two separate spheres. For one, we need to use Marxist strategy, and for the other one, we need to replace it by socialism. But the idea of alternative for patriarchy does not seem to be matriarchal society. Now let us discuss about radical feminism. Radical feminism tries to address the question of women's highly elaborate and deeply entrenched role in society and attempts to free them from the cage of femininity. In that, we talk about paternity, my dear friends. Because of patriarchal system, we are going to have discrimination in the traditional society, and it says biological different roles of men and women. Because of this, she is going to get lower status in the society. Firestone called for abandonment of patriarchal reproduction as well as capital production in order to explode myths of masculinity and femininity. Today, a biological revolution has become possible on account of a number of reproduction controlling techniques. That means women can also stop giving birth to children, and they can also take greater part in each and every arena. But our duty is not only to encourage the women, but at the same time, my dear friends, our duty is to eliminate fixed sex roles. Our duty is to eliminate it, my dear friends. If technology can eliminate the role of women, the reproducers, it can eliminate the role of man, the producers too, my dear friends. In this criticism, the traditional Marxist approach, the radical feminist, explain the angel's explanation why men wish to pass on their property only to the children was the weakness of this theory. Then we also have sexuality, my dear friends, because in the society we are going to have bias. So we need to have unbiased society based on sex and gender, my dear friends. Both women and men should be treated complementary to each other. They must be having complementary qualities of strength and compassion, which have traditionally been assigned to make the female characters. Then we also have the dialect logic of sex. Then we have uh, androgyny and misogyny. like Kate Millett Daly, they attack the concept of gender. She predicts is that the oppression gender biases will give away the radical feminism where a new begin will emerge. So they said that we must, in her book, Beyond God the Father, she stated that the God, the supreme patriarch, should be dethroned from the consciousness of man and woman in order that women may become full persons because the